What if I told you you could almost never water your garden and still grow a healthy, productive garden? And what if I told you the best part of this is you don't need any DIY skills and it's not going to cost a lot of money to set up? So in this video, I'm going to show you how I set my own garden up in such a way that I almost never water it and how you can do the same. So let's dive into it. Hey friends, welcome back to Gardens and Grace. For those of you that don't know me yet, my name is Tasha. And if you've been around here for any length of time, you know that this channel is all about helping you grow a productive garden with less time and less wasted money. So today's video is all about how we save time by not having to water very often and the strategies I use in my own garden to do this. And if you've hung out with me for any length of time, you also know that I'm a busy mom and I have a full-time job. I'm an accountant. I do not have a lot of time to devote to babying my garden, and I'm not going to come out every couple of days and spend an hour watering my garden. I don't have the time for that, nor do I want to spend time doing that. So this is what I do in my own garden to drastically reduce how often I have to water it. My very first tip is gonna be deep watering. And you guys know, if you've spent any time with me, you know how much I love this topic. So it is so important that we water our seedlings and our plants deeply but infrequently. And we start with this from the very beginning. The minute that I transplant a seedling into the ground, into my garden, I will use my watering can and I will water very deeply at the base of that plant, and I will encourage those roots to go down. Then I'll give it some time and I'll do the exact same thing again. And then I will start to, as the roots begin to get established, I will stop watering altogether. Usually, if I do have to water, I'm gonna, again, do it very deeply, right at the base of the plant. I'm going to target that root system. And by doing this method of very deep watering and also infrequent deep watering, what I'm doing is I'm encouraging those root systems to go really deep down into the soil. This prevents the roots from staying on that surface level of the soil. And as they go down, they're able to tap into water sources that are deeper in the soil, and they're not relying on me to water them or on the surface level water from the rain or whatever to water them. And because I do this, just this one thing alone, once my plants are established, I usually don't have to water them at all for the rest of the growing season. And tip number 2 is mulch is non-negotiable. Mulch is an absolute game changer. And you know how much I talk about mulch if you've hung out with me for any length of time as well. I talk about deep watering and I talk about mulch in most of my videos. But again, there's a reason why. Mulch is so important. If you want to water less, you need to mulch more. It's pretty much that simple. And like I've said in so many of my videos, you can use shredded leaves, you can use pine shavings, or you can use straw. My favorite is always going to be pine shavings, but leaves are going to be a close second, and I really like those because they're free. The thing about leaves is they break down pretty quickly, which can be great because it adds organic matter to the soil, but it also means that you need to reapply them quite often. You're going to want to make sure that your mulch is at least 2 to 3 inches thick. And if you do that and you maintain that 2 to 3 inch layer of mulch, not only are you going to not deal with weeds, but you're going to lock that moisture in place, and you're going to make it to where that soil retains that moisture. And because of this, there's not going to be any evaporation that's happening off of the surface level of the soil. It's going to lock that moisture in place, and it's going to be available for your plants when they need it. Pine shavings especially, it kind of acts like a sponge. And if you use that and you do a pretty thick layer of those pine shavings, you're going to find that it holds the moisture in and then kind of releases it back into the soil. It's amazing how long those pine shavings can hold moisture in the soil even when the weather is really hot. Tip number 3 to almost never having to water your garden is when you do water at the right time. So it can be really tempting to go out in the middle of the day, see our plants droopy and wilty and looking pitiful and think, oh no, we need to add water. This is one of the worst things you can actually do. Do not ever water your plants in the middle of the day. I don't care what is happening, don't do it. Water your plants in the evening or in the very early morning. Now, during the heat of summer, evening is actually probably a better time to water your plants just because it stays pretty warm. But in the fall or the spring when temperatures are a little bit cooler, it's probably better to water your plants early in the morning before the heat of the sun sets in. As the sun kind of sets in, it's going to evaporate that water off of the surface of the leaves and off of the surface of the ground. So that's why I say during the summer, it's better if you can water them in the evening, because that moisture is going to sit there longer before the sun comes to evaporate it. And it's going to have time to actually penetrate deeply. However, when temperatures are really cool, having that water sit in the soil or on your plants can actually lead to fungal diseases or stress the plants out, making them colder. So because of that, when temperatures are pretty hot outside, water in the evening. When temperatures are cooler outside, water early in the morning. And when you do water, use either a watering can or a setting on your hose that allows you to target the base of the plants and avoid getting that water on the leaves. Tip number 4 is plant spacing matters. And this one's actually almost a catch-22, because if you plant your plants too close together, then they're going to compete for the nutrients and the water in the soil. However, if you space them too far apart, then your soil is going to dry out faster, especially if you don't have a mulch layer. I like to use the square foot gardening method. This allows my plants to be spaced the perfect amount of space so that I'm not wasting any space, but also far enough apart that they're not competing for nutrients. I keep my soil well amended, it's full of nutrients and it's full of organic matter. This is going to hold that moisture in, and it's also going to ensure that even though my plants are spaced pretty closely together, they're not having to compete because there's plenty of nutrients in the soil to sustain each one of them. Tip number 5 to almost never having to water your garden is build healthy soil right from the beginning. So the more organic matter you have in your soil, the more water holding, moisture retention properties it's going to have. It is that simple. If you want soil that holds onto water, make sure there's a lot of organic matter in it. Use compost. You can bury your kitchen scraps. You can make your own compost. So you don't have to buy any from the store. But you can also add things like leaves that break down over time. All of that is going to add organic matter to your soil. The more organic matter that's in it, the better it's going to hold on to water. And do as minimal disturbance to the soil as possible. Try to avoid tilling. So as you're adding those layers of compost on top of each other, don't till it. You don't need to till your soil. It's gonna bring weeds to the surface, and it's also going to kill a lot of the surface microbes and biology that's building that soil for you. So avoid tilling and continuously layer on more and more organic matter, and you're gonna have soil that holds onto water and is much healthier. And if you're lazy like me, or I'm not really lazy, I'm actually more short on time, but if you're short on time like me, another quick bonus tip is you can actually bury something like pine shavings or straw deep into your raised beds that will act like a sponge and keep you from having to water pretty much at all. So one way to do this is at the beginning of the season, before you plant anything, you want to make sure you have a little bit of time for it to break down. Take some pine shavings, take some straw, make a very deep trench in the middle of your raised bed and bury a layer of those pine shavings or that straw. You want something that's already decomposing maybe a little bit because it can tie up the nitrogen in the soil, that's true. And then bury it back, wait a few weeks, then plant in it. Be mindful that this will probably tie up some of the nitrogen as it begins to break down that first season. So to kind of counteract that, add a little bit more organic granular fertilizer. Maybe think about adding a little bit of liquid fertilizer to your plants throughout the growing season, just to make sure they have enough nitrogen. But for the most part, if you're well amending your soil, it's not going to be that big a deal. And this buried material is going to act like a sponge. It's going to hold onto that water. And then as the soil begins to dry out, it's going to release that water back into the surrounding soil. And if you're not tilling, you have microbes and worms that are also kind of helping to move that water around throughout the soil. This is a really great tip. I've actually heard of people doing this and not watering their garden at all throughout the entire growing season, other than when they first started seeds. To be completely transparent though, I really almost never water my garden, like literally hardly at all. But I also live in Florida where we get a lot of water. There's a lot of water falling from the sky. So you may have slightly different results in your area. However, if you follow these principles, if you follow these strategies that I've outlined, I guarantee you, you are going to reduce how much you have to water and how often you have to water. You may have to water a little bit if there's no rain in the forecast. That's something I do keep an eye on. Most of the time, as long as I know I have a decent rain at least once a week, I don't even worry about it. If it's going to be a long period of time in between rains, start looking at 10 days or something, I'm going to check the soil. Most of the time, I still don't have to water as long as my plants are already established. If they're brand new seedlings, I err on the side of giving them water rather than them dying. I will say that. That's probably the only time I have to water. During the fall and the spring, we might have a little bit less rain during that time. Like summer, there's just a lot of rain. But in the fall and in the spring, I have a little bit less rain. But because temperatures are cooler in the fall and the spring, I usually don't have to water very often, if at all, during those time periods either. But again, I live in Florida, so I'm not going to guarantee that your results may be the same as mine, but I will guarantee that if you implement these strategies, you will water a whole lot less. Let's follow up with a couple of common questions that I get when it comes to watering specifically. And one is going to be, okay, but how do I know when I need to water my garden? Like, how often should I water realistically? The answer to this is I can't give you an answer on that. Every area is going to be slightly different and your garden's going to be different than mine. Here's what I can tell you. Use the fingertip method to check the moisture level of your soil. I've talked about this in other videos, but basically stick your finger in the soil about this far down, about to that second knuckle, okay? If you feel moisture on the tip of your finger, you're doing okay. If you don't feel moisture on the tip of your finger, it's time to go ahead and water your garden. That's how you're gonna know. The other thing you can look at is how do your plants look? In the middle of the sun, in the middle of the summer, in the middle of the day, your plants might look a little bit droopy and a little bit wilty. They might look a little sad. That's probably pretty normal. But if it's the evening time, if temperatures are have cooled down and it's the evening time and your plants are still looking really pitiful, go ahead and give them some water. They probably need it. Another question I get often is, how do I know when my seedlings need water? Like if I've started seeds in cups or trays, like how do I know when they need water? And here is the key to that. You're gonna look for the top of the soil to become crumbly and lighter brown. If the top of the soil is dark brown, looks really like that rich dark brown color, there's probably plenty of water in it. If you touch the surface level of that soil and it feels moist, you're good to go. You may not want to stick your finger in to check the moisture level of the soil if you've just started seeds, especially if they haven't germinated yet. So look at that top layer of the soil. Is it starting to look light brown? Is it starting to look dry? If so, go ahead and add water. And my tip for watering your seedlings, whether they've sprouted or even before they've sprouted, is to bottom water. And I've talked about the importance of this in other videos, especially like some of my seed starting videos, but the basic idea is take your trays and your cups, put them in a tray that it doesn't have any holes in it, and pour water at the bottom. Allow that water to be soaked up into the cups or the trays where your seedlings are, and then wait about 20 minutes and pour off the excess water. And question number 3 that I want to answer today is, does this work in containers? Like, will these practices and principles work in containers? The answer is absolutely yes. I will tell you, however, containers dry out a lot faster. So it's going to be really important that you're checking the moisture level in your containers. But if you're using a thick layer of mulch, you're using deep watering methods, and you're, just maintaining consistent moisture in those containers, you're probably not going to have to water them nearly as often either. Now, I will say that I actually had some experience with this year, planting my potatoes in containers. I planted my potatoes in January, which for me, that's technically spring. It's spring weather. But I planted my potatoes in containers in January, and I almost never had to water them. I did water them a couple of times just because I was out there and just because I wanted to make sure that they didn't dry out, or, I knew I wasn't going to be able to water them like the next day or over the next couple of days. But every time I checked the soil was moist. There was never a point where I felt like my potatoes actually needed water. I watered them a handful of times just because, like I said, I didn't want to miss the window of needing to water them. But I added a really thick layer of mulch, and that was pretty cool because potatoes can actually shoot up. The potato leaves, the potato plant, can actually shoot up through a very thick layer of mulch with no problem. So I started with mulch on top of that soil from the very beginning. I started with a very moist soil that was rich in organic matter. It was a good compost and a good, like I used a potting mix, I think, in the containers. I used some compost and then a potting mix on top of it. But in that, like I said, I really didn't even have to water. Now, I will say temperatures were a little bit cooler. I would not have had those same results had it been the middle of summer and I was planting something in containers. In that case, I would have to water it a little bit more often. But that's where that checking the soil moisture using your finger, that's where that can be really important. And as long as you're maintaining it, as long as you're checking it, you're gonna do just fine. You're gonna have to water a lot less in containers by using rich organic matter, a rich organic growing medium that's full of organic matter, using a very thick layer of mulch, and provide some shade if you can, and it's the middle of summer. That's also gonna go a long way in helping your containers stay moist. So if you're like me and you really don't like dragging a hose around your garden, use these tips to build a garden that practically waters itself. Let me know what you thought of the video. Let me know if you have any tips that help you maintain moisture in your garden, help you reduce how often you have to garden. Also, leave any questions you may have. As we start doing these videos, we're really gearing them toward new gardeners or toward just your questions. So leave some questions down below. We might make a video to answer it, or we might answer it in the next video. I thank you guys so much for watching. I'm gonna leave some videos on your screen until the next ones come out. Like always, I'm gonna leave some links down below in the description to some of my favorite products. And as always, these are affiliate links, which means I may earn a small commission if you purchase through them at no additional cost to you. I'm also gonna leave my free garden planning guide down below. Grab that. It is a valuable resource. It's completely free, and it's really gonna help you, know what to plant, when to plant, and just some basic tips on most of your common vegetables, their planting needs. So definitely check that out and grab it, completely free download. I thank you guys again so much for watching. May your garden be full of grace. May you be abundantly blessed. We'll see you next time. Bye.